And hello, all, and welcome back to On the Road with Vincent. Well, we've covered a lot of miles this season on the show, and in our theme of retracing our steps, we've seen a lot of places that were very impactful on my life and my love of traveling, and some places that were meaningful to the band as well. But today, we're going to go right back where we started from this season, back here in the woods behind my parents' house, along with my special guest today, one of my best friends for over 20 years, Midnite Massacre drummer, Kendrixx.
What's up, guys?
So stick around and follow me. Hello, all. Where would you like to ride today? The countryside? How about the city? Maybe a mountain forest? Or a sandy beach? No matter how far away, or in our own backyard, I hope you'll ride along. Okay, so we're now in the middle of the woods, and you might be wondering what exactly we're doing out here today. Well, as Christmas is just a few days away, if you go back and watch the first video of this season where we were back here, I mentioned that uh, on Christmas Eve, it was kind of tradition that we would walk back through the woods. My dad would take me and my sister while my mom was wrapping our presents. And I'm not really going to get into a lot of the backstory of the woods here. You can go back to that video that I'll link below. But, you know, used to walk back here all the time as a kid. And little did I know, though, that, even though I knew what was here at the end of the woods, there was a cabin down there, a pond. I had no clue that that cabin would pretty much be a second home to me after a while, spending the better part of a decade every weekend in that cabin. And as Dee and I have the longest history with that place, back in the days of Mortuary, when we started our first band
Mm-hmm.
back in 2009.
Fine.
Yeah. I thought, why not bring Dee along with us and we'll kind of retrace some of the steps because remember, I had just got my license then. Dee didn't even have a license. And when we'd be practicing, if I couldn't get a ride, I'd have to walk through the woods to get there, carrying equipment and all. So, thought we'd kind of bring you along with that. And afterwards, we're going to take you on a very special trip today. For the first time, we're going to let you inside of the cabin that we spent so many of the formative years of our lives making our first band Mortuary, the follow up project to that, Perfection and Decay, and of course, the main forming years of Midnite Massacre. So, come with us. So, something we were just talking about off camera is how these woods aren't really that big. I mean, right here, we're actually at one of the other edges, and, there's a road right up there, church on out there, you can't really see it. But it's still so easy to get trapped in here because there's so many dead ends.
Thick.
Yeah, if you look around, there's so many fallen trees, so many thick patches of brush that it takes a while to get around back here, especially if you don't do it as often as you used to. Okay, so we've already crossed the dry portion of the creek bed, and we're now on the opposite side of the woods, the cabin side, so to say. So now, just to give a little more background on you, I don't get to feature you on the channel as much. We met in '99, I believe.
Yeah, on the school bus.
Yeah, somewhere around there. Just one day, we had a little thing called assigned seating on the bus, and where they'd stick the bad kids together for whatever reason, thinking, hey, well, they'll have to watch each other. And yeah, that's how we met. And that was all the way back in '99. We've known each other since, and then going on to cutting class in high school to smoke cigarettes.
Yeah,
And
horticulture days.
yeah,
Yeah.
and then came the band. So I'm curious though, before the band days, when we were hauling my equipment back and forth through the woods, how often did you come back here?
All the time, honestly.
Yeah.
I never really sit in the house much as a kid, so I was always out here sneaking out to smoke cigarettes in the woods and trying to make new trails or out here just cutting with a machete.
Yeah, and it's just crazy to me. It's like how once again we never crossed paths back here because I was always back here too at that point.
Yeah, on the other side of the creek.
Yeah, and I guess we just stayed on our respective sides because
Yeah.
back then the creek was still flowing.
Mm-hmm.
Even at this point, like this is completely dry right now. But even up until, I mean, there was water coming through that even around about 10 years ago or
Yeah,
so.
that's what fed the pond.
Yeah. But we're going to keep on walking closer to the cabin and, try not to film too much as we're walking because as you can hear, these leaves are really loud and you probably can't even hear us even with the slightest jostle. So stay tuned. Now on this hill here, I've actually got a picture of Dee and our old guitarist, Claude, standing on the top of this. We thought it'd make a really cool band picture standing up there in the snow one January morning. But, I had a 2 megapixel camera. So, you see like two blobs standing there atop the hill. But, that was the best technology we had back then. Okay, so if you saw that first video earlier this year, you'll remember me saying that this was actually once the old road that came through here. It dipped down through this hollow and came back up the hill a little ways down. I'm really not sure where because naturally the pond wasn't here back then. This was back in the early 20th century. But it always fascinates me that this was here and all the years that we were walking back through here. I never really knew it and it just never really dawned on me that there was this wide stretch of flat land here for apparently no reason. So I don't remember if I actually mentioned this in my earlier video here, but where we're standing now was actually once like a decent sized little pool of water. And it makes me wonder if there might have been a dam built back here at one time because we're standing in a flat and, right behind me here, that would have been the bank of the creek. And over here, there's actually an old spring. It's dried at this point, there at the top of that little ridge right there. So this was a fairly deep hole of water at one point, you could tell. So after a brief little walk, we have finally arrived down here at the pond. And I go back to the first time I ever came down here in the spring of 2009. Just coming down here because Dee one day said, "Hey, we're all going to jam down at the cabin." Me, Claude, a few other guys I don't even have to mention. But no, they're all still pretty cool. We just, they're not really in the picture anymore. But when I first came here and saw what a tiny little place this was, again, I had no clue that I would be spending nearly every weekend here for the next 10 years within these 4 small log walls.
So my first time riding up to the cabin on my audition day, I remember following you up there, and we was going way off into the woods in Virginia where I'd never been up there before, even on them roads leading up to it. I remember going down because I was just thinking we were going to somebody's house. So we were going down this dirt path, and I'm like, where is he taking me? Because it looks like you're going to the middle of the woods. And get down and see the cabin, and it is, a little one room shack. My thoughts on it were, are we even going to have power in here? How do we all fit in there? Um, then I seen all of you guys, and I knew we were trying to do this, horror thing, and it's just totally not what I was expecting. I was expecting, you know, something bigger because of what we were doing.
So, what did you think was the probability that I was leading you there to be murdered?
Very high, being as I had found out about this whole thing on Facebook from somebody that I didn't know. Um, yeah, and then you were leading me immediately into the middle of the woods to a cabin that was sketchy. Yeah, that was pretty high.
Now, as I've said before, it was really not easy for some of us to leave the cabin. Even though, we actually hadn't spent all of our time here. There was actually a brief period, really at the beginning of Midnite Massacre, that we were at another practice location. But when we left the cabin for there, it was like all the energy was lost. We had no inspiration anymore. And I think some of us had those same fears when we actually finally left for where we're at now. Because look at this place. This is just serene beauty. It didn't even matter if you were practicing. If it got to a point where you just needed a little break, you could easily just step outside, enjoy this view, and go right back to it a few minutes later. Of course, there were plenty days that we would fish on the banks of this pond here and even just sit out here by the fire pit for hours into the night. So before we actually go inside the cabin, gonna do a little walk around of it, which I actually did on the season finale of the first season of On the Road with Vincent. But now that I have D here with me, he can give you a better history on the cabin.
Yes, my grandpa was born in it in the 30s. It was originally located a few miles down the road than what its current location is now. I know my grandpa and a few others moved it down here in '92. They had a big celebration, and A lot of the grass that you see was dirt. Didn't have no grass planted down here yet. As far as the stone right here on the fireplace, I mean, that was all they done that themselves. They were all very crafted and gifted masons, and yeah, that's about the history of it itself, about as far as I know. I do remember my grandmother toting around a video camera because I've seen the camera footage, and my mom was pregnant with me on the porch, and my dad was standing beside of her. But yeah, they had a big party down here, and there's playing horseshoes right here close where the fire pit's at. Um, the pine trees, the pine thicket up there was not up there at the time, separating the lots. But pretty good history, I believe.
And approximately how old is this? Because I know in my video I said something around right after the Civil War because I thought that's what I had been told, but I might be wrong on that.
I'm guessing my grandpa's dad built it. I think my grandpa was born in 37 or 38.
Mhm.
So I'm not exactly sure when my grandpa Giles was born. Yeah, I'm guessing like early 1900s it was built. Maybe late 1800s, I'm not really for sure. It could be built in the 1920s, but I just know he was actually born in this. Then, like I said, then they moved it down here in 92 from its original location.
Now, there are even some differences from the first time I was here. Now, there used to be a little set of steps right here, but to my knowledge, as long as we've been coming down here, this door never opened, right?
Yes, it opened. They just never used it,
Oh, okay.
and my dad ended up taking off the porch right here because it was kind of starting to rot
I
pretty
gotcha.
bad. And then yeah, they kind of use it like as a temporary exit, but just use the other door as the.
Well, there used to be that table against it, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
That's what. Okay, that's what
Yeah,
I'm
but you can
thinking.
actually go. It actually opens and works just fine.
Okay, and there's some new steps done here. Some new work has been done on the porch. This railing here, because I don't know. I think one too many rambunctious nights down here, and there used to be railing, right here where you see there is nothing.
It's just, and it was very old wood, and it's been rained on and
Yeah.
rotten. And
What was the lure of the cabin? Honestly, it's hard to put into words, you know, in a way. But honestly, when I think about it, the one of the coolest parts about it was the fact that we're in this modern age and we're in this room that there's no cell phone signal, there's no television, no Wi-Fi, nothing. It's just a group of friends that are hanging out and playing music. We had no heat source other than a fireplace, so that led to, winter nights that turned into 2, 3, 4 a.m. deep conversations. It's just like a secondary home for us all, and I think that we honestly grew because of that place.
So before we go inside, I was actually going to show you the way to actually get in the cabin is this little pull string that activates a latch on the other side. You know, pretty basic, pretty rudimentary, but that was our defense against all the monsters that were lying wait in these woods. And now, the moment you've all been waiting for, we're going to finally let you see inside our little cabin in the woods. So, okay, this is a good bit different than the last time I was in here. We had a lot of equipment in here at one point, but the last I was in here, this place was completely bare. Now there's been some furniture moved in here. I guess your dad has done
mm-hmm.
some renovating in here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Now.
So you can see on the wall over here, that's when they moved it. Oh, 91, my fault. It's
Oh,
actually
okay.
it's actually 91. Well, yeah, they moved it down here in '91, and they had the party in '92.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah, that'd be my grandparents. I don't know who the SFA is. I'm not exactly sure what that stands for, but
I have no
that would
clue.
have been that was my grandparents' initials.
Now this table was actually in here then. I'm going to show you a few clips here in a minute of what the cabin looked like back in the early days of Midnite Massacre and throughout the other bands. But that table actually used to sit against this door here. That's why I thought that door didn't work. So naturally, excuse the poor lighting in here because, again, the only light in here is this one little light bulb and the ambient light from outside. But try to give you a brief little rundown of what the setup was like in here. So, with the help of another friend, Dee had actually built a drum riser here in front of us. So, against this position, against this wall was Dee's position, the drums set up here. And, if you see us now, how many piece drum set are you using?
It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
And what were you using back then?
8.
Yeah. So this place was cram packed, double bass set here, really had no room to breathe. Then over in this corner would have been Raven's spot. His amp would have been against this wall. He usually stood here in front of the fireplace. Then Marshall would be typically against this wall. His amp used to sit up on the drum riser. And then my spot was about right here where this chair is. Again, we're all pretty crammed in here. And then once Steven come along, he was usually catty cornered over here against the stairwell. And this place is pretty tiny. Like I'll actually just walk from one end to the other real quick. So I'm up against one wall. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 steps, and my stride is about exactly 2 feet, so 12 foot by, I'd say right about 12 foot as well, inside here. Really no room for anything, and there were plenty of times when each of us had a second person with us. So, I'd say there have been times where there were at least 15 people crammed in here.
Yeah, especially huddled around the fireplace over there when it's really cold.
Yeah, and see, that really was an issue because the only electricity here is these couple lights and a few really janky outlets that usually would shock you if you weren't grounded, you touched the wrong thing. It probably wasn't the safest conditions to be playing in. I think a few instruments might have been casualties to this place, but there was absolutely no heat down here. And in the wintertime, this was our only heat source. And, typically if me and Dee got down here early enough, we could build a fire up
Just hang out.
and shut the door. Yeah, shut the door.
Stereo.
And then it would warm up pretty well in here. Once everyone moved in, everyone got the bright idea to huddle around the fire, and the temperature inside here would drop by at least 15
Unless we
degrees.
got it really hot enough, and then they would move the rest.
Good things about the new practice space. We have air conditioning in the summertime and heat in the wintertime, versus having to build a fire. We're not worried about being hot or cold, but it's just different. It's not the same. Cabin times, I feel, were a better time for, like, where we are as a family. It was a lot better for us then. I do miss it, and I hope one day we go back to the cabin at least just to hang out or have, a party or something, just to chill. But yeah, I would say, that's the biggest difference between then and now is, to me, then was a little bit better, with being cut off versus having modern world stuff now.
So now we're going to take a walk upstairs here. Haven't been up here in quite a while. Now, this is actually much barer than the last time I remember it up here. First time I was here, I just remember there used to be some stuffed foxes over here. And, it's just some cluttered stuff up here, just stuff we got out of the way. But there, by the end of our practicing up here, we had this into a pretty nice little living quarter. We had a table set up here with a TV. We had a couch over here, a few chairs. We just occasionally get up here and watch movies sometimes. And it was fairly warm because all the heat from the fireplace would rise right up here. And it stayed pretty warm up here. And that's where,
Very cozy.
yeah, and we kind of made this as for a place for, the girlfriends and wives. That way they could just sit up here. But the sound up here was abysmal because all the sound also moved upward.
I agree.
Now, as picturesque as this view is from this window, minus the smudgy glass right now, this was actually somewhat of nightmare fuel at times. For a period, Raven had this creepy mask, kind of like the one he wears on stage at times, and we had set that in this window. And you would just be leaving at night, and as soon as the headlights in your car would turn on, you'd see that mask staring out at you. And then this window over here, I remember one night, is where our old guitarist and friend Claude realized he was afraid of heights when he climbed up the chimney outside and didn't want to come down. So we actually had to get him. I don't know how we done that. There used to be like some boards across this or something.
There was, yeah.
Yeah. And we had to just like ease him onto those boards because he didn't want to go back down. And that's a long drop down. So, yeah. I guess that's probably where his fear stemmed from. Now, speaking of nightmare fuel, this cabin could be very, very creepy at night, and there were a few really strange occurrences that happened here. Now, I think one of the creepiest ones, though, is it was only a few of us left here one night, and right against this wall, we were hearing a tapping that just kind of sounded like, but it was kind of coming through the wood here. I can't really see, I'm blocking the light. But we kept hearing that little tapping, just a little faint, really faint tapping on it. And I believe it was Claude came over here, or one of us, and he started tapping back. Kept going. Well, for whatever reason, he just decided to knock 3 times, lightly, just. And immediately, right back, we heard. And that was all for us that night. Now, if you watch my channel enough, you know how I am. I'm pretty skeptical and can be quite cynical to certain ghost stories, but there are things that happen. And there were some very strange things that happened down here.
Creepy stuff that happened at the cabin. Yeah, I'm not a big believer in the paranormal or anything like that. But there were a couple of occasions where things got a little spooky down there late at nighttime. I remember there's one time we had a show in Charlotte the next day, and me and Claude were down there by ourselves, just like last minute practice, just kind of running through things, and we kept hearing like a noise on the roof. It almost sounded like it was raining, but it didn't sound like it was weird because we walked outside, opened the door, it's not raining at all, and we're like, well, maybe something's like the wind's blowing leaves or sticks or something out of the trees and it's just hitting the roof of the cabin. I don't know, but there's no trees hanging over the roof. And it just kept coming like in a downpour, and it was just so weird to the point where we left that night. We left and talked to the guys about it later, and nothing like that happened again. Nothing like that happened again. But then there was another time where me and Claude and Vince were there, and we kept hearing a noise outside. And so we just got really quiet and just stood there to listen, and swear it sounded like footsteps on the porch. It sounded like boots, someone walking across the porch. And we kind of freaked out for a second. I remember we all like grabbed something. Okay, in case somebody's here, we need to defend ourselves. Let's grab a fire poker and a guitar or whatever. And we walked outside, looked around, nobody was there. Still freaked us out enough to leave. Got in our cars and left. So yeah, unexplainable, not necessarily, but creepy for sure. Yeah.
So, with all the memories that were made here, I thought I would try to capture just a little bit of the essence that once lived throughout these walls. Because, stepping in here, it really does bring back just a flood of memories of, just all the years that we spent in here, all the songs written. And if you listen to our earlier songs, you can even hear that inspiration of this cabin in those works. So now I present to you 10 years of the cabin in the woods.
Well, as an outsider, being at the cabin and not somebody in the band, like, it just felt like such an escape, like, because we didn't have signal at all, so nobody was ever on their phones really for anything, because they couldn't be. So, like, we were kind of just forced to talk to each other, and that's not, like, a common thing anymore, and most of the time people are always on their phones. We didn't do that. We would just talk for hours, or just sit there and, like, I would just sit there and listen to the music or whatever, and it was really, really cool. And just, like, nobody else that wasn't at the cabin, like, mattered. Like, couldn't text me, couldn't call me, didn't matter. It was just, that was really cool, and I've, like, recently never had any place like that that I could go to where nobody was on their phones or anything. So just every Saturday night, it felt like I was going there to escape from everything else, and it was really cool.
So, something interesting that Stephen Midnight said off camera was that while we were down at the cabin, the place where Dee lives now was just kind of this abandoned, spooky house in the middle of the woods that everyone just kind of had these stories about. But now that we're practicing at that house, the cabin has now become that abandoned little spooky house in the woods that everybody has their stories about. Okay, so, we've talked about all the good times we've had down here at the cabin, but let's talk a minute about why we left. So maybe you could fill in on that.
Yeah, I figured I'd just give it back to my dad, and I kind of felt like we'd done about everything we could at the cabin, maybe, and we just moved to a place where it was we don't have to worry about building a fire no more. Everybody has a bathroom to go to if they need it. We can even watch football or whatever before practice, or
We have refrigerator, internet,
no more coolers. Not to carry around coolers
yeah,
everywhere. Yeah.
all the modern amenities you can ask for. Dependable electricity.
Which we've, like I said, all those things we have now is like what we didn't have at the cabin, but I do miss the cabin days. So, like I said, I do believe sometimes it made us closer as a band and as friends there
It,
for a time.
yeah, especially for the fact, like we've said, that there was no
Outside world.
yeah, there's no distraction. We were here and we were shut off from the rest of the world. There were rarely ever any outsiders here. With, on occasion there'd be, quite a few people here, but when it was a practice night, it was just us. No cell phone signal, no interaction with anything outside of the four walls of the cabin. It's truly a feeling that words cannot describe. You really had to be here. You just had to feel the power that this tiny little shack held. Well, that's about all the time we have today. I want to thank you for joining me on this very special episode of On the Road with Vincent. I've been planning this episode really pretty much since the beginning of the year to take you all back to the cabin and let you see how life used to be for us in the band. I want to thank Dee for coming along with me today, as he and I have the longest history together with this cabin. I figured it was only appropriate to bring him along, and I hope that you all have enjoyed him as well. Big thank you to the rest of the band for all of their input, and of course, I want to thank you all as well. Thank you for joining me this season On the Road with Vincent. We've got to visit a lot of locations that were really significant to me as an individual as well as the band, and we got to see some new places as well. I hope that you'll all continue to join me in all of my journeys in the years to come, and thank you for joining me in the years past as well. Of course, I want to wish you all a very Merry Christmas and a very Happy New Year. Stay tuned in the coming months. We'll have more episodes of Next Exit and our new spin-off series to On the Road with Vincent, Rest Stop, which should be coming out in the next couple months. So again, thank you for joining me on the Road with Vincent. I will see you all in the new year.